Welcome to another episode of the Founders Lounge, where I talk to some of the best founders in the UK to share their stories, learn their lessons, and hopefully inspire some more people to start their own business. So if that's something that you're interested in, this is a good time to click the subscribe button. Now, in today's episode, my guest was Joss Battle, and his journey as an entrepreneur is extremely fascinating on many different levels. He was born into entrepreneurship. He started selling things and he started small businesses when he was very, very young. And one thing that he's really good at is just identifying opportunities and then quickly hustling his way into creating a business out of that. And he talks about 3, 4, maybe 5 examples of that throughout his career. He started some businesses that grew to 140 employees very quickly, another one that grew to 200 employees very quickly. And now he just recently jumped on his next trend, which is in the eco-sustainability space. And he explains where they are with that and what are the other opportunities in the space that he sees right now. So I think you're going to find the story very inspiring, and I hope you're going to enjoy the episode. Joss, welcome to the Founders Lounge.
Hi, Mattis. How are you? Enjoying the rain of England?
Absolutely enjoying it, yes. And I'm excited to have this chat with you. So we got to meet, like a month or 2 months ago, and I was quite impressed or inspired by your story. And we only got to talk for about like 10 or 15 minutes. But I'm really curious to learn more today. You've had some incredible successes, as well as some failures as the whole entrepreneurship journey goes, right? And I think we're going to talk a little bit about all of that and about the things that you've done in the past and the things that you're doing right now. But I think maybe a good way to start would be just what got you into entrepreneurship, or what was your first business? And we'll take it from there.
So I kind of don't see it as got me into it. I think I was quite born into it. So I can recall being a child and trying to sell rose perfume on my street, which was probably age 10. And then I was always interested in numbers, so maths was probably my subject. I then ended up getting quite involved in gambling, but looking at arbitrage around gambling. So it was kind of trying to work out when online betting started. I was probably a bit too young to be able to do it, but never mind. But I used to find gaps in the odds where you could literally. It was mainly around tennis, so online markets opened, and you could bet on all the 3 outcomes on all 3, and you would always win a percentage. So it was kind of. It wasn't.
How long ago was that?
That must have been. So I'm 44 now. It must have been nearly 30 years ago. So okay. we were looking at different looking at different. I was looking at different markets and finding ways, and kind of it was with different bookmakers. So I started off looking at different bookmakers. So you had to run round the different bookmakers because I wasn't old enough to get in. I used to ask people I knew old enough, and they'd have £10 on one, £5 on the other, and £5 on the other. And that £20 might get me back £25. But you couldn't lose because all of the odds. They didn't put all the dots together because there wasn't the online transactions then. When online started happening much later, it became a thing, but then soon the online bookmakers realised people were doing that. I also, when I was at uni, I remember we did a student ball, so I did all of the kind of conventional entrepreneurial things, but without really knowing what I wanted to do. So I kind of spent a lot of my teens probably being an entrepreneur, but not just thinking about it, not doing a lot about it. I was just enjoying life, really.
All right, before we continue, I want to take a second to talk about our sponsor. I've always been saying that one of the best ways to learn about business is by working closely with a smart and successful entrepreneur, and this might be your opportunity. Our sponsor is a company called Judge Me. Judge Me is a Shopify product review plugin, and they're the #1 plugin on Shopify. They're literally, if you look at the Shopify App Store, they're in the first spot. They're bootstrapped, and they managed to outcompete other companies that raised hundreds of millions of dollars by just being smarter and building a better product. They were started by PJ, who was also a guest on the Founders Lounge, episode 54, so I recommend you to check it out. They recently moved their headquarters to London, and they're looking for smart people to join them. They're looking for product managers, engineers, and they're looking to fill other roles as well. So check out careers.judge.me and see if you find any role that you like and apply. So that's careers.judge.me. Now enjoy the rest of the episode. Interesting. Well, one sub question I have there is, so you discovered the internet very early on. How did that happen? Because if you're involved in like online things already 30 years ago, that was pretty much the beginnings of the internet, right?
No, so the 30 years ago was when I started doing it, but this was in-store bookmakers. So the internet,
right.
Yeah, I was quite early to it, but not really early. It didn't really become a thing in my head till I must have been about 20-ish, yeah.
Which is still reasonably early. I mean, I guess so 20-ish years ago is when the internet started taking off, right? I started building websites about, more than 15 years ago for sure, 16, 17 perhaps. So what was the next thing then? So your first then real proper bigger business, was that the marketing agency or not yet?
Nah, so what happened was I ended up getting into property, but it wasn't it was more of a lifestyle thing. I was living life, I was enjoying life, and the market was growing so much that buying a house and selling it tax-free was such a lucrative way of living a young person's life. And I probably did that around not really knowing who I was and what I wanted to do. So I had a few ideas, but I was probably too young to form them, and anything that I would have done then, it just wouldn't have worked because I was enjoying life too much then. But probably when I got to about 25, I started working with a it was a person who I was the best man at a wedding, and his father-in-law owned a legal practice, and he said to me, come and get involved in the practice and see what you can do, because you're too clever to be involved in property, and the life you're living, you're not going to ever settle down. And I was like, all right. And it was not as rigid around hours. It wasn't like a job, because I was always a kind of an unemployable entrepreneur, as most people are. And whilst I was there, I ended up finding some markets within the legal sector. And I worked with them at some of the markets. And then I decided then to set up a business on my own around one of the markets, which was something that was quite passionate to me and my family. And that's where the journey of an entrepreneur started, really, for me.
One thing that's interesting, I'm starting to see a pattern here in what you're saying, as well as the other things that we're going to get to that I already know from our previous conversations. I think there are entrepreneurs who are good at executing, and then there are entrepreneurs who are good at finding opportunities and starting those things up. Would you agree that you just seem to be really good at finding opportunities?
I literally, just the call before, I'm trying to work out exactly where I want to sit in the sphere of business, and more I think about it, I think that seeing an opportunity and making it happen is probably where I really excel. So I kind of work quickly and in quite a hustly way to get things going, and then try to backfill the structure once it's working. Because if you start with the structure, you fall over, because the people who work in a structure can't get the hustle that you need to get something going. So I would agree. I think that the hustly start of an idea, which could be someone else's idea that I think I can do better, or a problem that I found in my own life, or a problem that I can see in someone that I know's life, that's where I kind of look at things in a when people say they've got a problem and it's something to do with where could be an opportunity, I like that. I like that situation. My mind excels around that.
Very interesting. Can you give any examples of that, like what you're describing now, just the hustly, quick way of starting something? So I am, and especially I was in the past the opposite. I was much better at executing on something when I was not that good at identifying opportunities. And I think now I'm okay, but I'm still not, I would not consider that being my strength. And I had to learn firstly, how to identify opportunities. Secondly, how to execute on them very quickly. That's something that I've learned over the years, right? I would not say it came natural to me. And it was very foreign to me how to start something in a quick, hustly way. I worked with people who were like you. I still do. And that's how I picked up that skill. And I completely agree that it's very, very important. But for some of us, it takes time and examples to learn. So I'm curious if you can give any example of how that works for you.
So it's actually not a business one, but it's quite relative. So probably the most recent one of this that happened is probably in March 2020. I went to my local supermarket and there seemed to be a riot happening around toilet rolls. The world in England started thinking that because we were going into a lockdown, we wouldn't be any more toilet rolls, and literally people were holding on to them to life. Now, I left the supermarket and I kind of felt to myself, I've witnessed all of this, and I've got elderly parents, 70-year-old, and they live in a more inner city area. And I kind of thought, right, okay, I can see what's happening now, and I'm worried about what will happen to elderly people. So I literally drove from Morrison's to Aldi, and I filled my whole car up with goods that people could take for kind of food if they needed it. I rang up a friend who had an office, who I knew the ground floor had a warehouse, and I asked him to give me the details of his landlady. I rang her and I said, can I use your unused warehouse during this lockdown to deliver food to people in and around the city? This was literally on a weekday. Within 2 days, I'd set up a website called We Care Leeds, and we were the only place where a person in Leeds could get food delivery. So what we did is we set up a total voluntary system where we were getting donations from people to pay for the food, and if anyone applied, we would deliver food to them for free. So it literally within a week, we'd probably delivered 1,000 weekly food boxes a week from being in the supermarket. And I've never had any experience with food. I'd probably only been to Aldi once. I didn't work with any of the agencies. We set up literally a Facebook page. I spoke to some of the charities locally and said I was going to do that. And it got to a stage where we did that for the first 6 weeks of lockdown. And then the local council here in Leeds came to me and said, can we do what you've been doing? Because you did manage to do it so quickly, but now we've managed to set up a big system, and they put into there. But we probably delivered around 10,000 meal plans, weekly meal boxes to people in need around Leeds. We must have had 150 volunteers. We were getting fresh food, some food people needed, so we kind of established a way of buying the food, a way of packing the food, a way of delivering the food, a way of ensuring that the people got the food. And it was that was literally just hustled from that moment in the supermarket. I'd probably delivered some food before I went home from my shopping, because I kind of seen a massive problem, and I thought, it's only going to get bigger, and it needs someone who thinks on the feet to make it happen, because like the big charities and food agencies, there's so much red tape in there. And I was like, well, I've just bought the food. I can go and deliver it to whoever I want, and that's fine. So that's probably the best example, and obviously it's close to everyone's memories because of what COVID's done to everyone, of something where within a few days I had an enterprise that was really, really helping solutions. We had people who were applying on Facebook. I remember someone messaged me, and all of the Facebook messages were coming at all time night, and someone messaged me at about 4 a.m. It pinged on my phone. I woke up in the morning and it was, "Hi, my name's something from Sydney. My mum lives in a block of flats and we can't get in touch with her. Can you go and deliver some food because we don't know whether she's alive?" So we had requests from all over the world for people who were living in and around our community and needed it. And it showed that you can get something done, and it also brought lots of people together at the same time. But it was like an enterprise. So that's kind of where I kind of fit in the hustle. It's just learning on the job and not letting anything stop. Like, I could have sat and just come back to my house, but those meals, probably that many people wouldn't have got that food now. I'm not saying it wouldn't have eaten, but we definitely helped some people feel a bit more secure in such hard times.
Love it. Absolutely incredible. And I'm sure we're gonna get to more examples like that as we talk. So if we go back to your story, okay, so we finished with, so you got into some legal kind of business, and then what was next then on your kind of
whilst
journey?
I was at the solicitors, we talked about a few markets, and unfortunately my grandfather became really ill, and he was elderly, probably about mid-60s, maybe a bit later, a bit older, sorry, and he had a really serious stroke, and then the local authority were asking my dad's family, of which it was on my dad's side, would he sell the house to pay for the care home fees? And as a moral, values-driven person, I kind of thought that seemed a bit unfair. He'd worked hard, he'd been an electrician, he'd paid for his house, he lived in a semi-detached bungalow over in Lancashire, and it seemed wrong that he had to sell his house. So I started doing a bit of kind of Erin Brockovich style digging, and I found that actually I found evidence of things where it said if a person's primary need was nursing care, that the government should pay for that person's care. And I was like, I'm certain that my grandfather is this one. So my auntie actually was a nurse, so I went and sat down with her. I started asking a few more people, and then I thought, right, okay, this is my moment to go and step out and do something for myself. So I set up my own business, which was, at first, it was generating a kit. What I'd planned to do was use the skills that I had learned from working alongside the solicitors to generate volume cases. And then it transpired, because what happened then was I jumped straight into it, as all entrepreneurs do. I left working there. I got a little office. I put an advert in the Daily Express, and I was in between. I was on page 23. It's probably the worst spot you could find in the paper, and I was in between. I'm sure it was a breast implant and some other kind of strain. So my advert, which was around, did you pay for care home fees? We could investigate where we could back. We literally had about 400 calls from £1,000 advert, and all I had, and literally my business, I'm happy to tell you now, the business was me in my front room. So I was there, and then the Daily Express switchboard would ring me up saying, please get more staff. We're getting people calling our switchboard saying we want to ring up for this advert. So I was sat there thinking, right, I'm on to something now, because there's a lot of people in this. So I went round I probably put a suit on for this, because you're meeting solicitors, and solicitors need you to look smart, because they don't think you're smart unless you look smart. And I went round with a suit on and said, oh, hi, I've got this market and this is what I want to do. And everyone said, nah, you're not onto anything. And so I was like, what do I do? I've got all these customers now. So I thought, right, I'm going to put another advert in the press. So I put another advert. And luckily, a gentleman got in touch with me who actually used to be a tax inspector, but he'd actually ran 5 of these cases and was successful. So it was quite funny, because when you're kind of at an early stage in the business, there's a lot of faking to make. So I can recall I had a car that might have been worth £1,000, and I asked one of my friends, could I lend a nicer car to go and meet him, so he didn't. But because I was advertising in a national paper, I think he thought that I was much bigger than actually it was just me. And then he agreed to work alongside me because I couldn't find any lawyers to do it. But what then happened was I did a few more advertising campaigns, but it became really obvious that there was loads of people who they could be entitled to lots of money back, but it was going to take a long time. So in that time, I can recall I set up a tyre recycling yard. I also set up a LED lighting business, and I'd set up such things to kind of see whether I could set some other horses racing really to kind of back it. The tyre recycling was really hard labour, and we didn't make any money. The lighting was, I think we were probably 10 years too early for the LED lighting, so we got some contracts, but it kind of meant I could stay alive. And then about 2 years in, we won our first case, and it wasn't my grandfather's, but in that month we won my grandfather's. So in 1 month we probably got people back in terms of care home fees of probably about £500,000. And at that stage, I was like, right, okay, I can't keep all these plates spinning. I've got to really go for it. So I said to she was my wife then. I said to my now wife, still wife, do you mind leaving your job and working for free because this is going to work? So she left her job, and we actually got an office, and then we started really advertising. And then when we could prove that we'd won something, all of the solicitors who didn't believe there was a market there, then they all started coming back to me saying, oh, we've seen you in the national press, because it was we started off advertising in the national press, so there wasn't online advertising then. We were just advertising the biggest, most expensive way possible. So that gives you a kind of a credibility that people think you must be bigger because of the cost involved in it. So we managed to kind of in a long way, we got it to a situation where lots of the solicitors that I told about it then really wanted to get involved in it, and we probably about 6 months after that, I decided to I remortgaged my house, and I spent £50,000 on a TV advertisement, of which I was told I'd never done it before. The company that I'd worked for had gone on TV, so I'd seen the success TV had. I might have begged, borrowed and steals of some friends a few £10,000 here and there, and I offered them lucrative terms. They kind of didn't do it. And I went on television, and literally the market exploded. And we were within 3 months of being on TV, the government said you are not allowed to put a case in like this again. So we had till September 2012 to do it. But we managed to be involved in around. We had about 70,000 inquiries, and we ended up representing about 15,000 people. But because of the efforts, we were quite involved in the outcome of what happened afterwards. So we had numerous meetings with the NHS, looking at what the procedure needed to change to. But the market, we probably ended up having about 15% of the market. But there were so many other people who jumped on the bandwagon, of which that was fine. But if I hadn't have done that first advert or the TV advert, none of that would have happened. So, because lawyers are not the most entrepreneurial people, so I was working in a legal market where, because I was entrepreneurial, I was pushing the boundaries, and then when they seen it working, they all jumped on the bandwagon, and that's fine. But there will have been literally billions of pounds which were recovered because of that campaign, and obviously it had quite a moving feeling for me in because I managed to get my dad's family back. I think we got them back about £90,000 of what they'd paid. So it was kind of it was quite opportunist, but it was also quite activist, which kind of suited my nature, my values. So I was like, this isn't fair. I'm going to do something about it, and I went for it, and I was lucky that it worked. And the TV campaign that we went, I remember I got invited to, we were on ITV a lot, so much so during the day. I got invited to an event by ITV and I said, can I put some more adverts? And in the summer, they said that my advert had been the most complained about advert because people were sick of seeing it so many times. So an average consumer was like, can you stop this message going on all the time? And all I wanted to do was serve more adverts because it was just helping so many people. So it was, but then in 2012, the government said you can't do it anymore. So I was kind of that entrepreneurial kind of understanding and growth had to stop there. So I had to like have a reset and kind of think what I was going to do next.
When you say the government said you can't do it anymore, was that, so did they just completely cancel this, well, like scheme or what it was called, or was it
so
just
what they said was if a person had been in care, let me remember, if a person had been in care from April 2004 to, I think it was like 6 years on to that, you literally couldn't put a claim in. So it meant that going forward you could do it. But if you'd imagine, if someone's been in a care home for 2 weeks, you've probably spent £500. But like my grandfather who was in there for 3 years, you spend a lot of money, and obviously it was kind of to kind of clean up the market and make sure that you weren't allowed ever to do it again because there was so much noise now created. I actually, one of the funniest stories, I had to go to London for a meeting and I was late for the meeting and I was driving. I hope you don't have any policemen watching. And I was driving and I was probably over the speed limit. And my accountant was in the car and I was talking, driving. Next thing I know, the hazards go. I was just near, I was probably south of Leicester going down the M1. So I got pulled over and my accountant's in the thing, oh, Josh is going to be late for the meeting. He's been pulled over. I wasn't doing over 100, but I was definitely doing over 70. And they pulled me over and took me in and said, oh, did you not, they were literally following, they said they were behind me for 10 miles. I had high visors on and they said, did you not look back and see us? And I was so engrossed in my conversation with my accountant, I obviously didn't look back once. So they said, oh, can I have some, you've obviously been speeding, we're going to have to do something. Can I have some identification? The only thing I had on me was the business name and bank card, which was care home claims. So I handed it to him and the guy looked at me and he said, oh, care home claims, a police officer. So I said, yeah. I thought, oh, is going to be someone who, he's going to think I'm just a claims person who's text them all night or cold call them. So I was like, yeah, that's my business. And he said, oh, I called you the other day and it was really near the deadline. I called you the other day and you've got my grandma was in a care home and I called this number. Is there any way you can make sure it goes through? And then, so I was like, hold on. So I rang up the office, we found his thing and he said, right, okay, seems though you're such a good person, well, I'll let you go. And he let me off and I drove to London and went to the meeting. So it was kind of, I didn't get any I didn't get any awards, but for me, that was my own award because it saved me 3 points on my license.
That's an incredible story. That's amazing. Okay. Well, so obviously, yeah, that just continues the pattern that I already mentioned before, right? The same kind of business in terms of you just found this opportunity and you executed on it very quickly and kind of breaking the rules a little bit, not necessarily breaking the rules, but yeah, as you were saying, kind of pushing the boundaries along the way, right?
Yeah,
to make something happen.
One of the things that on that we literally needed so many staff. I used to go, we were working in a little place where I still live, and I literally used to go to the supermarket and I used to ask people in the queue, did they want to have a job? That's how many staff we needed. We literally went from no staff to over 2 different offices, about 200 staff in about 6 weeks. So the recruitment there was like, come and have a job. Lots of people stayed. Some people didn't stay. We had quite a little merry band of brothers. We had an outsourced call centre. We used to take the calls, used to go over there, but we used to I think we were getting that much post that I bought the Royal Mail lady a kind of a truck, like a pullable truck, so you could come, because the amount of post that was coming for us, she couldn't carry it in the thing. So I kept on seeing, and I was like, wow. I ended up saying, "Oh, can I pick it up from the office?" They said, "No, they've got to deliver it." So we bought them a little pulley trolley, so they could put like a cargo trolley, because the sorting office to our office was probably only, it might have been 100 meters, 200 meters, but we literally grew from nothing to that in weeks.
That is incredible. And so was that all? That was the all the people that you had to employ. That was just to process all the inquiries coming in, and then solicitors. Were you actually employing solicitors as well, or were you just kind of referring to other solicitor offices?
It was a weird model. So what we found out, it wasn't a legal process. It was actually a nursing process. So what we needed the people. We were getting, on average, 4,000 inquiries a day. So it's quite. If you go on television, you might get 400 calls in literally 2 minutes. So it was like, right, who's going to answer all them calls? And then once they'd answered a call, what we would do is we would send them out. This was in so we would send them. It wasn't digital, so we would send them out a paper form. And then what we would do is and people, when they got it, the form was like 15 pages long. So then what they would do is ring back up. But when they rang back up, we knew that they must understand it a bit more. And then what we had people who were more medically trained then. Right, tell us about the person, what happened to the patient, when was she in, when were they in, what happened to them. And then what then we would do is ask them to fill it in. We would go back, send everything off, and then we would work. So we must have had 15 law firms who we worked with, and we had different relationships with them. Some of them we would sell a case. All of them we would retain some interest if the case won. Some of them we would get more money, some of them we would get less money, and some of the cases we actually had some nurses ourselves, where we kept some ourselves. So we kind of had a process where one to them, two to them, just to make sure that we spread everything out, because obviously the amount of cases that was coming in, it was really new market to everyone. So there was probably an element of the whole market, of which we were quite prominent in. We had to like train legal people as to what to do, because they were like, people get excited by volume, but get scared by work. And we'd done lots of the work before. So we offered, this just because we wanted people to win the cases, because that's what we'd set up the business to do. We kind of went round and trained some of the solicitors, and some of them were quite accepting, some of them didn't want to listen to us, but that was fine. But we kind of tried to help and use all our knowledge across the market to try and help. And after the market stopped, I think it was the 29th of September 2012, we then got everyone together and said, look, there's no one in competition now. We all need to fight one cause. Let's all. So we must have had 5 or 6 collaborative meetings where everyone worked together, which was really good.
And so you only got paid if the case was won, right?
Yeah, so all of that was done with that only understanding case. And just to give you an understanding, we started taking cases on in 2007, and I still have 20 cases now. So there was cases that I paid for advertising in 2007 that the families still haven't got the money back, and we're still fighting their cause now. So we've probably only got about 20 cases, but we actually won one yesterday or the day before. But those we've not been allowed to advertise for 10 years, but we still continue to run them cases. And if I'm honest, from a business perspective, obviously we've not now made money on any of them cases, but we told these people about the market. We know more about them than the market, and that's what we've continued to do.
Okay. And then next, so then what happened?
So then I probably thought that life was easy, business was easy. First business that had really gone for, had worked, had been really successful. television was a market where that was really the thing that changed my life, and every lawyer around, personal lawyer, not commercial lawyer, had heard about this market. So everyone wanted to talk to me. Everyone wanted to talk to me about markets. Everyone knew that I had balls to kind of go for something if it was there, and probably had a bit more entrepreneurialness than an average solicitor. I might have tried 2 or 3 markets, of which none of it worked. And I was like, oh, what am I going to do? And then I came across Facebook. So what happened was, as I mentioned before, we were getting customers for about £11, and I was like, oh, I'm the man. £11, that's unreal. Someone came to me and said, oh, have you heard about Facebook advertising for customers? And I was like, no. All right, I think I can get you customers for 2p. And I was like, I don't believe you. So I was like, but here's my credit card. You can sit in this meeting room. You can spend £200, and I'll tell you what kind of customers I want, and let's see. So I left the office, and the office was we'd actually taken an office which was a kind of an old mill type of thing, and I could see the guy in the room. And what then happened was I could see my phone so I said to you kind of had the alerts when an email came, and my phone was literally just alerting. Like I couldn't understand what was happening. I was looking, and it was saying new lead, new lead, new lead. I started laughing, and I went in and he went, how much have you been paying for a lead? He said, oh, 4p. And I was like, wow. And literally, I think for about 5 minutes, I said, oh, I need to go and get a drink. So I went and got a drink, and I tried to fathom, because my head went into total overdrive, because at 4p an inquiry, I was like, wow, I could literally take on the world here, because I found something, and this is going to work. So I sat down with the guy, and I kind of tried to reason to think about what to do next. But probably for about the next month, I probably just couldn't work out what to do, because it just led in my head to so many opportunities, because I'd kind of spent most of my career around legal services and claims, which is really boring, seen as quite spammy. And then I started thinking, well, actually, this could apply to everything across financial services. It can apply to holidays. It could apply to mortgages. It could apply to credit card applications. It could apply for loans. And I was like, wow. So I then said, right, okay, I'm going to solely focus on Facebook advertising. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a group of businesses that works with regulated partners to collect leads and data. And then underneath, what we were trying to do is we were trying to create a all-encompassing consumer database of UK consumers, where we had quite a lot of data on them. And what the end goal then was to try and this was all around GDPR, so we had all the complications then. But what we were trying to do was we were trying to use the lead generation we were doing to build enough data on people, so that a UK consumer could we would create a web-based app or a technology platform where you could apply for a mortgage with literally one bit of information, or you could get a car finance quote with literally giving me one bit of information, because I would have all of your information, and it just mean that literally one click and I'll get you a quote. And what we were looking to do is sit somewhere around Money Supermarket or something like that, so we would always get you the best quote. So that was the plan.
And how did that go?
So we took, and literally, so the business at that stage, probably lots of the people who were working in the claims business, we had a period where there was not enough to do. So that business collectively kind of contracted down to about 10 people. And then we started with this more marketing-based business. At that stage, there might have been 5 people. We ended up getting it to a situation where we had 140 people, and we were we were probably in the UK. And we didn't just do in the UK. We had partners where we were getting inquiries in Spain, Australia, America, Germany, and we were kind of, on some days we were getting as much as 50,000 consumers in a day. So we just became
Well, and so
amazing.
that was just a
Yeah.
Facebook marketing business, just doing lead gen for other businesses, right?
Yeah, but the bit where we were different is the businesses. We didn't charge for marketing services. We paid for all the marketing and we shared in the revenue, or we part own the business, or we. So we kind of were building this. So we would go to you. We would kind of find people who would say, right, I've got a business doing this. We would say, right, okay, let's see how many customers I can get you. And they might be doing 5 customers a day. And I would say, well, I know now I can do 5,000 a day. How are we going to make it work? So we would maybe say, right, okay, we're going to help you build a call center. We're going to help you build a database. We're going to help you fund it. So we kind of look to kind of maximize, to ensure that when Facebook was really cheap at a cost per acquisition, we could maximize that opportunity, because we knew that the success we were having, more people would jump onto it. So it's kind of one of them things. When we started off at 10p, and then 10p became £2, and then £2 became £20. So it kind of it grows like all marketing platforms do. So that's what happened. And it kind of grew and grew and grew, and we became synonymous for kind of the business that if you wanted to get customers, come to us. So we were getting inquiries from all over the world, people who knew we'd work, people had kind of seen some of the successes that we created. But what I wanted to do really is, because I'd had a business before which was more cash successful than an exit successful, what I wanted to do was I wanted to create something that had long-term value. So that's where we were looking underneath to build this database and data asset. So we probably had got a tech team of about 15 people, some really, really good back-end and front-end developers. But that was where we were different from everywhere. And then in about 2007, we had a board. I was still the major shareholder. I think that I had 90% then. And we decided that we'd probably done 12 million revenue and made £4 million profit. And the next year we thought we were going to do 30 and make 20. So it was, and we had a lot of VCs looking at us, and our model was really clever, because what we were doing is we were using technology underneath everything, and no one really knew that. So we were looking really at the long term. What we didn't have was we didn't have a consumer facing brand. So what I and the board decided to do was, the business was probably a lot involved around my brain, so that we kind of sat down and said, if you want to exit for the maximum amount and you don't want to get locked in forever, why don't we look now, when we know that this is coming in, to find a CEO and a person who could run the business, and you can kind of be the chairman, or you can be the person who, the founder, but you've literally got some security in it, so that person can continue, and then you can kind of sell the business and move on to other things. So I went on an extensive headhunting process and interviewed some of the most amazing people in the country. Can't name them all. And I ended up finding someone who we shared the same values. They liked that they worked in corporate businesses, but I think they liked the fact that this was a entrepreneurial business that probably needed to become a bit more corporate, because it was now at a stage where we needed more people, we needed that. So it kind of fit. So it was kind of, we made a decision that I would stay around for 3 months and do like a handhold, and then I would let them crack on for a bit. So I decided to, my wife and kids and we went on a road trip across the Rockies, and we went and lived on Malibu Beach for 2 months. So I kind of had a proper R&R where I had nothing to do with the business, and I kind of got really fit. My 2 sons who were not at school, so that was good. So I got to spend loads of cool time with them. I got to explore the world, so that was really good. and then I came back and everything was not all right. So there was I think the challenges that the business was having was they were used to me, who was probably led the business a bit like a fun dad. So we had bars in our office. I'd taken the whole team to Las Vegas. There was 120 of us that had taken to Las Vegas. And it was kind of fun-driven leadership. And we used to... There was so many things we did. We had in our office, we had a fancy dress room. So if someone was feeling a bit down, we would like sit down with them and say, right, who do you want to put in fancy dress? And we'd send someone and they'd come back dressed as a chicken and things like that. So we used to incorporate lots of silly things to try and do stuff. We also did stuff on a more meaningful. We kind of gave people, if they wanted a day off a month, where they could go and help in local charities around the community and stuff like that. We used to each month we used to do things where we used to have like lessons. So we had a Morris dancing lesson, and then we used to pay for Spanish lessons, because we said that any country we're doing work in, we'd pay for people to do a language lesson just to kind of make them have a new skill set. So we used to invest a lot of time into our culture and our people, and I think that was kind of that kind of bit that you don't understand until you leave was probably missed a lot by our team. And the new leadership was probably a bit more corporate, and they really didn't like it. So I ended up having to get rid of the CEO within about 30 days of me returning. But quite a lot of the mistakes that she had made meant that literally within 6 months of me returning and thinking that I might be able to get a valuation of around £100 million, I had to sack 120 people in a day, and I had to put the business into liquidation. And that for me was like,
oh wow,
I'd been on Malibu Beach within 6 months thinking my life was done. I'd created such an amazing empire, and it all went. And then this was 5 years ago. So it was quite hard for me to take that. It was a bit like a public car crash. I'd been involved in hiring loads of the people. It was a bit like a second family, and we all had a really good relationship. And then when things go wrong, everyone runs out the door and they all point the finger at you. And sometimes it's not always your fault, but because it's your business and you're the director, you've got to take everything on the chin. And it was really bad timing, because I was 40 literally the week after I got rid of all the people. So I'd planned a big party for my 40th. And like that day was an amazing party for everyone else, but I was like in another world because I was upset about what happened, embarrassed, and all the emotions you go through. So it was on the verge of being a really big success, and we spent a lot on tech, we spent a lot on culture, like I said. And I think with probably hindsight, if that handover had been managed better and stuff like that, the business would have gone on to being really, really big. But the joys of being an entrepreneur.
Oh wow,
yeah.
That was quite a story. So that went really from the highest heights to the lowest lows, pretty much, right? As much as the kind of swing can be.
Yeah.
So you said that was like 4 or 5 years ago, and then you're now so now obviously you have another business, which we're going to talk about in just a second. So what would you say you're doing differently now with this business? Because obviously, so you had some huge successes, and then obviously eventually this thing failed, right? What are some main takeaways there?
So I think that I think there's a lot to be said in an entrepreneurial business, and is an entrepreneurial business always an entrepreneurial business? And it's kind of, if you start it as an entrepreneurial business and you keep running it like that, no matter how big it is, it might need that entrepreneurial heartbeat running through it all the time, because how do you turn an entrepreneurial business into a corporate business? And do the people in there need to change? Do the values need to change? Does the culture need to change? So that's probably the biggest takeaway. The business that I'm involved in now, and we set up we actually set up probably about the time that was happening. It doesn't have as many people, but we have had quite significant growth. But it's ensuring that looking at things around the finances, looking at things around the staff we've got involved to kind of make sure the right people are doing the right things at the right time. And that was probably didn't end up happening when you've got a business that's quite profitable. You probably don't need to look at everything. And the business that I've got now is not, unfortunately, is not profitable yet. So there's quite a lot of, it's a different way of looking. When you're making lots of money, things seem easier. When you're not making any money, things are harder. So it's kind of, it gives the different flip of the coin.
Mm-hmm. And do you think, so I think quite a lot of entrepreneurs kind of dream about the sort of scenario that you went through when you build a business, it became very successful, and then eventually you want to either sell it or just hire a CEO who's going to run it. Do you think you're going to have doubts about hiring a CEO next time to run your business? Or do you think you just made a mistake, learn your lesson, and it's going to go better next time?
So obviously for the first few months afterwards, that was the biggest thing that I had in my head. But being a business person, listening a lot to people who've been successful, listening to people who haven't been successful, I know that hiring the right people is the key to business. And I was told by someone a great line. I always wanted to be the most stupid man in the boardroom, and I really think that's the thing, because if you can attract people who are clever than you to come and be involved in your business, then you will be successful. So I think that, yeah, it probably has made me think like that, but you've just got to view it like that, because otherwise you'll always end up, everything's got to be about you. And actually, to create the best businesses, you're like, from my own perspective, I know I'm not a person to run a business from the start all the way into being something that's big. And I'm probably at this stage now with the business I've got now, Ecovibe, where we've gone through a bit of a hustle stage, and I probably need a business leader, an everyday business leader, rather than a entrepreneurial hustler, really. And that's where we are. So at first it was like, oh no, it's their fault, but actually it wasn't. It was just wrong reading of the timing from me, and just things happen like that. So at first it did knock me back in terms of hiring good people, but now 4 or 5 years on, I'm so into hiring amazing people. I actually probably the most exciting meetings I have are recruitment. I love hiring people. I love trying to put together a jigsaw of people who have done bits of it before and putting them together. And I kind of want to, when you asked a question earlier on, Mattis, about am I an entrepreneur who starts things? I think this is where I'm kind of getting to my head. What I need to do is get it going, have a hustle team, and then building some experience and people around that, and then move on to the next thing, and then steer it from the top, whatever that means, and try and help people. But that's where I think that's where I want to get to. So it's not, I'm always trying to do things that I actually know there's people out there who are miles better at doing it and actually love doing the bits that I'm not good at. Yeah.
It's 100%. I see that's where you thrive and that's what you're good at, and it makes sense to focus on those things. How do you go? You mentioned before that you should strive to be the least clever person in the room, which I often do as well. I mean, that's part of the reason why I'm doing the podcast. That's part of the reason why I have the community, which you're also a member of, and so on and so forth. Because I think, if you're surrounded by people who are smarter than you or more ambitious than you, or in some aspect of life somehow a few steps ahead of you, I think you get inspired, you learn from those people, and as you said, that's your big focus as well, trying to find people who are just smarter than you. Do you have any particular approaches or strategies how you go about that? I saw I think recently you're more active on LinkedIn as well, so maybe that's one one approach. You mentioned before that you come to London often because there are a lot of smart and driven people here as well.
I think it's kind of being out there and having conversations and kind of knowing where you're like. I'm a big believer of hiring around your weaknesses, not training around them. So I know where I'm weak. So it's like, right, okay, I know I'm not very good at that. So how can I find the best person? I've started to, when you're hustling, recruitment is a big kind of, or do you want to pay a recruiter because they take 20-15% of what they sign on? And what ends up happening is you kind of then find people who find you. And actually, I think at a certain stage of the business, using a recruiter who you trust and really understands the business can really help, because what they do is they outwardly go and find people who could suit you. And that's if you use like a football analogy, the scouts are the people who find the best players, and actually that's what recruiters are. So I'm kind of working closely with some recruiters who I trust to kind of say, right, this is where I am, this is what I need, go out and try and find me these people and keep getting me in conversations. So I'm opening up to more recruiters, I'm reaching out to more people and having conversations to people in and around the same spaces, so you can kind of and I'm kind of like, coming to London is just opening up different networks really, because I'm based up in Yorkshire, and there's not as much of a thriving entrepreneurial community as there is down in London. So understanding a few new businesses, what they do, and kind of that's really important.
Okay, so we mentioned Ecovibe a little bit, but we didn't really talk about what it is yet and what was the story there. We did clearly say that you're good at identifying opportunities and trends, and so that's the latest opportunity that you sort of jumped on. So can you talk a little bit more about Ecovibe?
So it's quite a strange way how it started. So whilst we had the larger business called People's Holdings, we were spending quite a significant amount on Facebook, and I was sat there thinking, right, there's something going wrong here, but we're good at acquiring customers on Facebook, and there's lots of businesses, e-commerce businesses. Why don't we set up an e-commerce platform or an e-commerce business? Because with our credit terms that we had, we could sell, we could get paid, and then we could pay the advertising platform back much later. So if we can sell for a profit, we should be able to make it go. So I had a usual Joss brainwave where I decided that on the Friday I would allow people a day off if they turned up with a unicorn. Anything unicorn, hair clip, jumper, teddy bear, anything. And they would be split into teams. The teams would be asked, they'd get a full day off, and at the end of the day, they'd have to come back and present to me what their best idea of what they thought could be a unicorn. I can't remember how many teams, but there was definitely there was probably about 5 teams. People came back, and one of the ideas was Ecovibe. So the team had set up a website, they had already set up all the social profiles, and they'd bought the domain, and we weren't trading as a business, but we had the platform ready to go. And what the team had seen is that there was a lot of businesses selling plastic-free items on e-commerce platforms, but they were probably more lifestyle businesses, so nice meaning business owners who had said, "Oh, this is the way to be." And the team who were involved in it kind of had a bit of experience, because they were probably mid-20s, so probably younger people are more environmentally conscious than older people, so they'd kind of been buying some of these brands and looking at things like that, so they were like, why don't we go for it? So what we decided to do was we kind of set up I'm going to say it's an incubator, but it was a table in a room. And what I said to the people is, right, we hired we kind of chose a few people from the office who kind of wanted to be involved in this new venture, and they started. So they literally, we just had experience in online marketing. So then between them, they had to work out what products we were going to sell, how we were going to post them, what we needed to do for customer services, everything you've got to do with an online platform. And that was literally all self-taught. which was and actually the market was probably just at the right time for lots of people now getting into it. We called it Ecovibe, and when we first started, if you said you were eco, literally you had to be eco because no one was talking about it. What you find now is if someone says they're eco, you do have to question whether they are actually eco or they're just using the word to try and help the business. So we've kind of ridden the wave of being really early to the party, where some of the products that we sold probably weren't good enough for people, so they probably didn't like them. We also worked with some suppliers who might not have been as honest with what they were saying as what they were with their green credentials. So we then started then working with some manufacturers who we still work with now, where we ensured that our products were actually what they said on the tin. We made sure that we as consumers tested the products before our customers did. So we kind of learnt that the hard way, and we just kept on growing. So we're at a situation now where we've sold to over 170,000 UK consumers, which is quite good growth, and we sell to. We've got a database of about 15,000 shops in the UK which have inquired or bought from us. So we sell to lots of little zero waste shops as well of our products, and at present we're just looking to see whether we can expand out in some of the major retailers in some of our product line. So we're kind of quite big in and around the sustainable, plastic-free eco space. But what we're trying to do is eco is quite a big word in terms of what it could mean. So we've probably flirted around what does it mean, because you could probably never be truly eco, because that would mean you would live in you'd live in a mud hut with a leaf over your private parts, and that's not really going to happen. So we're probably going to slightly pivot and just be talking about being saving plastic, because all of the products we sell are around mainly stopping single-use plastic or buying something that you could reuse rather than buying something that you have to throw away all the time. So we're going to kind of, to make it more obvious to a consumer and also the impact that the consumer is having, we're going to make you as a consumer realise how much you are actually doing for the planet, and the best way we can do it is showing it is through the plastic that they've saved.
Yeah, so the whole eco thing is interesting. So I did a little bit of research before our call today, and there seems to be, well, clearly there's data showing consumer behavior that there is a growing interest in buying. I think it was a third of all consumers that they would prefer to pay more for a product that is sustainable in some way, which I find interesting, because I'll actually say that that's a pretty high number, pretty high percentage, because I think that most consumers, that's just from my personal, I guess, observation, most consumers are primarily, they care about the price and the convenience, right? And then after that, is it sustainable? Is it eco-friendly? And so on and so forth. And I think, again, that's just my opinion, but I'm curious what you think. I think the only way to really make eco products mainstream is when the price and the quality and the convenience is kind of equal or better to non-eco products, right? I think Tesla is a good example. Tesla versus what was that one car? One of the first electric or hybrid cars that was somewhat popular.
Prius, Toyota Prius.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And Prius was always a little bit mocked, was like, yeah, I don't know, it's not cool. Like, nobody who wants to drive it. Only if you were like really eco friendly, then you maybe bought a Prius, right? Or some businesses bought Priuses. Tesla came in, changed everything because it's cool, because it's perceived as a very high quality car. They just really changed the mindset, and I think that's how they made it happen. I'm wondering how you think about it. That's just my perception or my thinking about the space.
So we've done loads of work around this consumer insight and things like that. So some interesting things that we found. So most of our consumers are based in the UK, so all of this is kind of UK information. But 90% of homeowners recycle and only 10% of people actually shop eco. So what that kind of showed to us is actually a few things. 90% of people do actually do care, because why would they recycle if not? So we started doing some research into what happened to make people recycle. And one of the most interesting things is one of the biggest things that changed was when the actual colour of the bin changed. So when the colour of the bin changed so people could show which bin was full of recycling, at that stage the recycling take-up went up. So you've got, and actually some of the reasons why recycling as a industry doesn't work is probably because of the take-up just changed really quickly and everyone started doing it. So you've got all of these people now recycling and they think that's their thing that they do for the environment. I totally agree with when we looked at why people don't buy eco: price, efficacy. Also, there is some negative connotations around being eco is kind of like seen as a club. So people are like, oh, well, I'm being eco. I'm not that person who's been on the M4. I don't like them. So they're the only people who are eco, so I'm not doing it. So actually, some of the activism that's going on is making a mainstream person thinking that you're supporting them. And quite a lot of the people in around the market and in around the sector, you're not really eco enough ever. So you kind of, instead of everyone's kind of, oh, that isn't good enough, that isn't good enough, that isn't good enough. So therefore, if you're being shouted at because you happen to have a bacon sandwich, but you've also got a reusable water bottle, but that's not good enough because you should have a vegan sandwich, that person is put off because of the negative connotations in and around the sector. So when we're looking at reviewing our product range and some of the products we've done quite extensive new product development, and we agree. So we've done a market research that kind of said exactly what you said. If the price is the same and the quality is the same, then people would just shop eco. But what they need to understand is what they need to see that, and they need to kind of be told that. So you can't, when you go into a category in the supermarket, there might be an eco product there, but if you've never heard of the brand and you don't know what it is, you probably just keep buying what you do. So there's not enough. Yeah. There's in around the sector, in around the space. There's brands because they're doing significant money, but they're not brands like big brands. They're not doing hundreds of millions of pounds or billions of pounds or anything like that because people aren't aware of them and the education isn't there. So there needs to be a move to kind of say, well, right, okay, how are we going to make it as good and how are we going to make it the price? And so in some markets, it's quite challenging. So plastic was invented because the people who made the products wanted to make the product better. It wasn't invented to kind of ruin the world. And probably if you look at some of the products which have toxins in and chemical products, they weren't invented to pollute the world. They were invented to make the product that people wanted to sell to make more money better. So you're competing against some of the scientific challenges of why the actual products that we've now found that we're saying are bad for the planet have been created, which is quite hard. So what you've got to do, and what we think we've done quite well, is we've kind of looked at what people buy and worked out the simplest way and the products which people will simply switch. So you're not attached to that brand. The costing probably might be the same. It might be a bit more, but it might last a bit more. You've not got you've not got the issues around quality because it usually works the same, and they work. When you find things where laundry is one, I remember being a kid and you had all the adverts of the dirty kids sports uniforms. The toxins and stuff that was created to take them all out, literally from a plant-based derivative or something that doesn't exist, it's going to take years to be able to kind of properly replicate that. So if you've got the dirtiest white t-shirt, an eco version of that is not going to work as well. But if you've got some clothes that just have a little bit of dirt on or something. The eco stuff would work and you wouldn't even notice. But there's the kind of the how do you are you comparing like with like, and are you not? And that's where we want to the new range of our products we're going to call Don't Cost the Earth, because for exactly the reason. So we don't need to cost the earth because of the planet, but we don't need to cost the earth in the back pocket of a consumer, because if we don't, then people won't buy and you won't get that market adoption. So we're trying to position ourselves as the brand where people start their eco journey. Right, okay, I want to be a bit more eco. I trust this brand. They've done a lot of work around it. The products look good. They're priced accordingly. I'm going to give this a try. And then what might happen is they might go on to be more eco, and we might not sell their products. But in order to start people on a journey, you've got to start somewhere. And I think that at the moment, you're totally right. You don't know where to start, and it probably costs you too much to start, so therefore you can't.
So I have two follow-up questions on this. One is more for the consumers. So, and because I'm personally very interested in that as well. So if somebody who's listening to this podcast, an average, citizen in the UK or in Europe in general, or wherever, somewhere in the, let's say, developed world, and because you've been, thinking about this space a lot and involved with it, what can an average consumer do? What are like the simplest things that I can do to live a more eco-friendly life, a more sustainable life? Things that we don't necessarily know or think about. So obviously we talked about recycling. You said 90% of people are recycling. I'm even shocked about how people don't recycle much, because very often I just people like chucking the same things, all the things in the same bin, and they don't really care much. And I personally feel like that's the absolute least that you can do, because all you need to do is you just need to have 2 or 3 trash bins at home and throw the right thing in the right bin, and that's all. So that seems easy. So that's the first question. And then the second question is for entrepreneurs who are listening to this, somebody who wants to start, who wants to jump on this opportunity from business perspective, but also just help the planet. Are there any specific opportunities that you see?
So I think in order to make a difference, I think you need to look at the simplest things that you can switch in your own life, because every person's life is different. I'm a dad of 2. I'm involved in a few businesses. I live in the middle of nowhere, so I'm driving quite a lot. So and I've got a lot going on. So therefore, to change certain things in my life are literally impossible. So each person's got to look and see, right, what's the easiest thing that I could do around it. I also do think that that kind of understanding, trying to do a bit of education around it. So understanding, right, okay, what are the things that have impact, and how can I actually do something about it? Like, obviously, with the business that I'm involved in, shopping is one of them. But actually, I think that commerce, I talk about a term called fast commerce, and fast commerce, I think, is probably one of the worst things for the planet. So as a Western world is quite greedy and quite impatient, and when they're told they need to buy something, they usually do, if they can afford it. So that then makes you feel that you need to buy all the time, and Amazon has really, really made that possible. Which that means that when you want something, literally you can have it the next day, and in some places you can have it within a couple of hours, and then there's other things now where you can have it in 10 minutes in London. Yeah, which means that as a consumer you can consume all the time, and I think that consuming less would be a massive thing. So rather than buying something every day, let's try and buy more things on a weekly, because it's not just the couriers, it's the fact that people do it. It's the addiction around it that actually is the problem, because if you wake up and if you can somehow wean yourself off of buying things every day, and it's really hard, I'm not saying I can do it, but if that was a thing, if you could make fast commerce less of a thing, and that addiction that must be happening in people's brains as it does mine, if that could stop, that would have the biggest impact. but it's Amazon's one of the biggest businesses in the world, so they're going to try and make sure that that doesn't happen. So that's the first thing around that. Around opportunities, there's so many opportunities around. I mainly see opportunities around products and markets around there. So some of the big biotech and things like that, I'm not really involved in, but there must be so many materials that could be used cost effectively that could replace some of the materials that aren't good. So if you think about plastic, if recycled plastic became cheaper, then we wouldn't have so much single-use plastic. So if somehow we found some products that en masse could be made from recycled plastic in the areas in Southeast Asia where literally it's full of all of our plastic, the kids who are on the street begging, they could go around and collect our plastic. Someone would pay them for it, so it would help their economy and their life. And then it could be created into... So I think that the looking around... I use the analogy trash and treasure. Some people's trash, if we could somehow create that into a product or products which should sell mass market into treasure, that would massively help, because recycling is quite flawed. So even though we say we recycle, how much actually gets recycled? So it's kind of looking at what's in our bin and seeing what could be made. And I'm seeing quite a lot of innovation done in America, and I'm on some groups in it with American people who are involved in the sustainability sector, and there's lots of cool things happening there around waste and looking at how waste can be worth something, of which I think there's a massive... If someone can create if someone can create a mass product that is mass market, and the material around it, and the economics of the supply chain. But one of our biggest problems is waste. So therefore, that's probably one of our biggest opportunities. And some product scientists could probably create something that all you need is would you spend 20% more on something that you know has really helped the planet and helped all of the economy of the world? Definitely. But it's kind of working out what that is and how that can be broken down.
Okay. And by the way, so I just remembered another thing while you were talking, on something that I've learned recently, so more on the consumer side of things. So I'm going to be moving houses soon, and I started kind of cleaning up a little bit and trying to get rid of, things that I don't need, so that I'm not moving them to a new house for no reason. And there are a bunch of like old electronics and some books, etc., etc. And initially I was like, well, I'll just throw it away. It's not worth anything. I get nothing to do with it. I'm not going to use it anymore. But they're still useful, and some of them are still working. And there's this app called Olio, Olio, where you can give stuff away for free. And it's amazing. You list something on the app what happened to me was within 5 minutes, somebody reached out and they were like, yeah, I need this. I can come pick it up this evening. I was like, great, amazing. I don't need to throw it away. So I'm not throwing something away that's still useful, and somebody's going to use it, hopefully. And they're happy. They're going to get it for free. I'm happy. Somebody's going to come and pick it up. And it works great. And if it's something that's slightly more valuable, then you can list it on, for example, Facebook Marketplace, and you sell it for £10, £20, whatever it might be. I think that's also a small thing that you can just do to get rid of things that you maybe don't need anymore and they're just lying around, but somebody's going to use them, right? And you're not creating more trash in the world unnecessarily. And often those are items that are hard to recycle, right? Because it might be like an old camera and there's like thousands of different parts, and from what I understand, it's hard to recycle those things. So as long as they can just be reused, it's probably a better way to deal with it.
There's another site called Music Magpie, which they kind of look to refurb electronic goods. They started off by CDs, but now I've seen a podcast up with the guy who actually been quite prominent in this field, and he's now looking at electronic goods. But also there's things like, which I really think are cool, are like community libraries where and I think some things like a ladder. So a ladder might cost you £200, but not everyone on your street needs to buy it, because I've used it once. So if everyone on my street knew I had a ladder, then when they need it, you want to spend the 200 quid because you need it. But actually, if they knew I had one and knew I was happy to let them use it for the afternoon, then what's the difference of it being sat in my garage? So there's things where, as a community, you can kind of community sharing and understanding. So there's lots of opportunity around that as well, which I think also has benefits above the environment, because obviously building a strong community means building better relationships, building better people, and.
Yeah. One more, probably the last question before we wrap up. I think so on LinkedIn, your current title, I think, is something like Green Unicorn Builder or something like that. Do you think you're going to be building more businesses in this space, or what's your plan for the future?
So I've always said that I wanted to build a big brand that created an impact, and I don't think I've done that yet. So I've still got a box to tick. I've been in the sustainability space for about 4 or 5 years now. I'm not the most sustainable person in the world. I'm not a person who's an activist around sustainability, but I am eco-conscious. I make eco decisions where when can. I try to, when I've got time, I make more eco decisions. But I see, in terms from a business perspective, the work that we've already done and the learnings we had, if I'm going to create a business that's going to be something, the opportunity around this sector is now, because more people I know greenwashing is a thing, but people are trying to greenwash really because people are kind of thinking about eco. So I know it's not right, and people do lie and but people are lying for a reason, and there's going to be, if it's not me, there is going to be some really big businesses around this, which I think the next really big businesses have to be good for the planet. Otherwise they won't be big, just because of the market sentiment. So if there's going to be some businesses that are big, I might as well keep looking around. It might not be the one that I'm involved in now. It might not be the next idea. It might be someone else's idea who we might invest in or something like that. But I'm going to stick around this space for quite a while. Probably this will be I'm 44 now, but I've always had a thing that by 50 I wanted to be able to travel the world with my wife and be an Eskimo for 6 months and do crazy things like that. So I've got a thing about being 50. So I've got 6 years left. So let's see.
Well, you'll come back on the podcast in maybe before 6 years, maybe in like a few years, and we'll see. We'll do a milestone check-in. We'll see where you get.
Yeah.
Jos, thank you so much. This was a fascinating conversation. I think you're a very, very inspiring entrepreneur. As you said in the beginning, kind of born into entrepreneurship. And I'm glad that we had this conversation. I think a lot of people are going to find it very interesting. So thanks a lot for coming on.
Brilliant. Thanks a lot for inviting me. It's been fun. You don't get a chance to really tell the full story a lot. So hopefully your listeners like it, and we'll see.
I have no doubt that they will. Awesome. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening until the end. I hope you enjoyed it. If you like the content, please do me a favor and click the like button on YouTube, or give us 5 stars on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever it is that you listen to your podcasts. Leave a comment. Subscribe if you want to hear more from us. That really helps also to get the podcast out there, and that helps me get more interesting guests and create even more interesting content. So I really appreciate it if you do that. If you have any other comments, questions, feel free to message me. You can find me on Twitter. That's usually the best channel. The link should be somewhere in the description. And check out my Twitter. I try to tweet interesting stuff about similar content that we talk about on the podcast. Key insights from the podcast as well, and just generally stuff that I learn and stuff that I do. So see you. Thanks.